The Boston Celtics are one of the NBA's most decorated franchises. They're tied with the Los Angeles Lakers for 17 titles in their entire franchise history, yet they have not won an NBA championship since 2008 when Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Kevin Garnett would team up and beat Kobe's Los Angeles Lakers, making it 16 years since the Celtics have won an NBA title, the second longest drought in franchise history. But what's different about this drought versus the one that occurred from 1987 to 2008 is that this drought has been full of Eastern Conference Final appearances, specifically 6 appearances to the Eastern Conference Finals in the last 8 seasons, with 5 of them including Jason Tatum on their roster and 6 including Jaylen Brown. So let's take a moment and look back at this streak that these modern day Celtics finally have a chance to break in this year's NBA Finals. This is the modern day curse of the Boston Celtics. Boston would draft Jaylen Brown 3rd overall out of the University of California in the 2016 NBA draft. And on the back of 2-time All-Star Isaiah Thomas, they would reach the Eastern Conference Finals, losing to LeBron James's Cleveland Cavaliers in 5 games. But Jaylen did not have much of a role on this team. He played just 12.6 minutes per game, scored only 5 points in the playoffs. This was a really good Boston team that had won 48 games the year before, and in this season won 53. So it was a unique position to be in for a 3rd overall pick. And in that next offseason, Boston would again have the 3rd overall pick in the 2017 NBA draft, selecting Jason Tatum out of Duke. How is it that the Celtics would have the 3rd overall pick in back-to-back drafts, even though they were a playoff team, you may ask? Well, you can thank the Brooklyn Nets for that one. Back on July 12th, 2013, the Boston Celtics and the Brooklyn Nets agreed to a trade that would send Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Jason Terry to the Nets. And in return, Brooklyn would give up Gerald Wallace, Chris Humphries, Marshawn Brooks, Chris Joseph, Keith Bogans, first-round picks in 2014, 2016, and 2018, and a swap in 2017. Hayden Bird of Boston.com has a good article revisiting this trade 10 years later. And while it's easy for us to look back and see how obvious it was that Garnett and Pierce were just too old and it was way too much to give up at the time for such aging stars, the Brooklyn Nets had just been purchased by a Russian billionaire, Mikhail Prokhorov, in 2010, and he had predicted they would win a championship in 5 years. They had just finished 4th in the Eastern Conference that year, going 49-33. They had a good young core of Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, Brook Lopez. So I guess in their mind, they were thinking these 3 aging veterans could put them over the top in contention for a title. But the craziest part about how this trade allegedly went down is best told by Boston Celtics co-owner Wyc Grousbeck. He's quoted saying, "I was pretty sure that Prokhorov's staff told him, if we get these 2 guys, we're going to be the favorites for the championship. And so," I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh while reading this quote. "And so I thought we ought to just see what else they'd give us, because I thought Nets management didn't want to tell him that the deal had fallen through." He goes on to say, "I wanted to push the other side to the max. So he had Danny Ainge asking for more than just 1 first-round pick. He asked for 2. The Nets agreed to 2. And then Danny Ainge went back and asked for 3 picks. They agreed to that as well. So they decided to ask for a 4th, and the Nets finally said no. But Grousbeck had the brilliant idea, or so he says, of doing a swap in 2017 instead, which at the time was a lottery ticket for them, as the Nets should be good for 4 or 5 seasons, plus a lot better than a rebuilding Boston Celtics team. The deal was accepted on both ends, and looking back on it 11 years later, here is how everything went down with the picks involved. This video is brought to you by OddsJam. OddsJam is a top choice for data-driven sports betting, tracking over 260 sports books in real time. How does it work? Thanks to the OddsJam arbitrage tool, it identifies discrepancies in sports betting lines across the market. This tool finds arbitrage betting opportunities and can guarantee risk-free profits by spotting those differences. But that is not all. OddsJam also offers a positive EV calculator to help you optimize your bet sizes and bet tracker to monitor your profits across all your sports books. By using OddsJam, you'll bet smarter and more responsibly, leading to long-term profitability. OddsJam is so confident in their product that they offer a 7-day free trial as well as 35% off your first month. So head over to the link in my description and use code WOOD for a 35% discount and that 7-day free trial. Thanks to OddsJam for sponsoring this video. Let's get back into it. The Nets received Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Jason Terry, DJ White, a 2017 first-round draft pick swap. They took Kyle Kuzma with that pick, and a 2017 second-round draft pick, taking Sasha Vencikov. The Celtics received Keith Bogans, Marshawn Brooks, Chris Humphries, Chris Joseph, Gerald Wallace, a 2014 first-round pick where they took James Young, a 2016 first-round draft pick. They took Jaylen Brown, a 2017 first-round draft pick swap, which at this point, 4 years later, the Nets had the worst record in the NBA, and the Celtics would get the number 1 overall pick with that swap, would trade down and take Jason Tatum, and a 2018 first-round draft pick that we will talk about what happened with that later on. Again, as crazy as this deal was, at the time, it wasn't considered that crazy. Even people like Bill Simmons had this to say about it. In 2014, the Nets would refuse to re-sign Paul Pierce, would fall to 38-44 in 2015, traded Kevin Garnett back to Minnesota, and the wheels fell off from there. But we could do a whole video on the history of the Brooklyn Nets. This video is on the Boston Celtics and their historic streak of Eastern Conference Finals. So let's get back to the 2017 playoffs. The Celtics would lose in the Eastern Conference Finals to LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, refused to re-sign Isaiah Thomas to a longer-term deal. Instead, they would trade their 2018 first-round pick alongside Isaiah Thomas in a package for Kyrie Irving. And like we said earlier, they would trade with Philadelphia, letting them take Markelle Fultz, netting a 2019 first-round pick and taking Jason Tatum at number 3. Led by Kyrie Irving, second-year Jaylen Brown, and rookie Jason Tatum, the Boston Celtics would win 55 games and again make the Eastern Conference Finals. But unfortunately for Boston, they would do so in the playoffs without Kyrie Irving, who had knee surgery in March and missed the remainder of his season. Without their star, 19-year-old Jason Tatum and 21-year-old Jaylen Brown would thrive, leading the team in points per game at 18.5 and 18. And although they wouldn't make it to an NBA Finals, they fought valiantly versus LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, were even up on them 3-2 after 5 games. And remember, they did not have Kyrie Irving. This was incredible experience for a rookie Jason Tatum and sophomore Jaylen Brown. They'd be back. In 2019, they would go 49-33. However, they would get beaten by the Milwaukee Bucks in 5 games in the Eastern Conference Semis, one of the rare Eastern Conference Finals misses. But it made sense when you look back at it. Kyrie Irving shot just 38% from the field in the playoffs, and the Celtics team almost had too many pieces that wanted the ball. Gordon Hayward was back after injuring his ankle in game 1 of the season before. There was probably just too many chefs in the kitchen, and it was time to shake up this roster. That offseason, they would trade Terry Rozier for Kemba Walker, and they would fail to re-sign Kyrie Irving as well, who would team up with Kevin Durant in Brooklyn. The Kyrie Irving 2-year saga was a complete failure for Boston, and it still leaves a bad taste in Celtics fans' mouths today, which is an incredible storyline for Kyrie in these finals versus his former team. With Kyrie gone and a new season, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown would see another surge in scoring output, averaging 23.4 points per game, going 48-24 during this bubble-shortened season. And after a 7-game series versus the Toronto Raptors, they would find themselves back in the Eastern Conference Finals, this time versus the newly formed Jimmy Butler Miami Heat. Kemba Walker had a fantastic season in his first year with Boston. Matter of fact, he would be an all-star that year. Marcus Smart at just 25 years old, would be first team all defense. And although Jimmy would beat them in 6 games, this was an incredible learning experience for Boston. Tatum and Brown were just 21 and 23 respectively. They had now been to an Eastern Conference final as the 1A and the 1B. They would only get better from here. The 2021 NBA playoffs was an unfortunate one for this Boston Celtics core and probably the low point during this 8-year stretch. They would go just 36 and 36 and match up with the Brooklyn Nets in the first round. At this point, the Nets had added James Harden to the fold, forming one of the most talented big threes that we have ever seen on the offensive end. Unfortunately for Boston, they would get gentlemen swept in 5 games, and this was the only playoff series ever that James Harden, KD, and Kyrie played together, as Harden and Kyrie would both only play 4 games in their next round series versus the Bucks. But it's all right, because not only did you run into a buzzsaw in that Brooklyn Nets team, you also did so without Jaylen Brown, who tore a ligament in his wrist right before the playoffs. This core was building. You're still young. You'd be fine. That offseason, they would move away from Kemba Walker, who shot just 31% from the field during that Nets series, including 17% from 3. And after a 1.5-year hiatus, they would get big ol' Al Horford back in the fold, trading Kemba to the Thunder for Al. They would also move Brad Stevens to the front office as Danny Ainge stepped down and hire Ime Udoka as their coach. At the trade deadline that season, they would acquire Derek White for Romeo Langford, Josh Richardson, a 2022 first-round pick, and a 2028 first-round pick. Although this team started off slow, they were humming by the time the playoffs came around. They would sweep the Brooklyn Nets in the first round, beat Milwaukee in 7 games, and then finally, they'd get revenge over the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals, winning in 7 games, making their first NBA Finals during this run. Tatum and Brown were phenomenal in that Heat series. Tatum would average 25 points, 8.3 rebounds, 5.6 assists on 46.2% from the field, and Jaylen Brown, 24 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists on 48% from the field, matching up with the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals, where they would lose in 6 games. Boston would actually take a 2-1 lead to start this series, but the experience in the finals that Golden State had would prove to be too much. Jason Tatum would struggle mightily shooting-wise in this series, shooting just 36% from the field. But at the same time, if you're a Boston fan, you tell yourself again, Tatum and Brown are still really young. We finally broke through the Eastern Conference Finals, made our first one. We didn't get it. We'll be back. That offseason, they would acquire Malcolm Brogdon from the Indiana Pacers, finish second in the Eastern Conference, but after the Bucks would get upset by the Jimmy Butler-led Miami Heat in the first round, the Celtics had to be licking their chops. They would get by the Philadelphia 76ers barely in 7 games, matching up again for a 3rd time with the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals. And before we get into that Eastern Conference Finals, during the regular season, at this point, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown took another step forward. Jason Tatum averaged a career-high 30.1 points per game, 8.8 rebounds, and 4.6 assists. Meanwhile, Jaylen Brown, a career-high 26.6 points per game. And both of them would play really well in that 76ers series. In that Miami series, it was a wild one. They'd get down 3-0 and become one of just like 11 teams all time to battle back out of that 3-0 hole and force a game 7. But at that point, the Celtics had nothing left. They'd scored just 84 points in that game 7, lose by 19. And for all the criticism that Jason Tatum got in the 2022 finals, this specific conference final loss had Jaylen Brown bearing a majority of the blame. He averaged just 19 points per game, shot 41.8% from the field, just 16% from 3. And this was massive because Jaylen Brown had the opportunity to sign a Supermax extension in this offseason. It was going to be a big decision for Boston. I will say Jason Tatum did not shoot it well from 3 in this series, just 23%, but he did all of the other things you could ask of him. And even with shooting so poorly from 3, he still shot 46.9% from the field. It was this specific offseason that everyone started beginning to wonder, could Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown as co-stars not just coexist, but win a championship together. The Celtics brass sure thought so when they signed Jaylen Brown to a supermax extension, 5 years, $304 million, the richest contract in NBA history. This move was planting their flag in the belief that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown can win a championship. But the Celtics were not done in this offseason. No, they would also add Kristaps Porzingis, trading Marcus Smart to the Memphis Grizzlies in a 3-team trade with the Wizards. And once the Damian Lillard trade to Milwaukee went public, the Celtics swiftly made a move for Jrue Holiday in Portland, solidifying a supporting cast around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown of the utmost talent level. And the rest is history. You watched them play this season. They won 64 games, just one of 26 teams in NBA history to do so. They've waltzed their way through the Eastern Conference Finals en route to another finals appearance, albeit Jimmy Butler did not play in that Heat series. Donovan Mitchell was injured for parts of that Cleveland series, and Tyrese Halliburton for parts of that Indiana series. But to me, none of that really matters. I do think the Heat actually have a chance to beat the Celtics in the first round, but the other two teams, in my opinion, did not. Plus, the Celtics have been missing KP since that Heat series as well. This Boston Celtics team has been dominant all season long. Matter of fact, they've been favored in all but just 3 games this entire year, which is tied for the fewest amount of any team to make the finals in NBA history. Game 1 of the 2024 NBA Finals between the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics begins next Thursday, where Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and company have the chance to restore their franchise to its former glory, winning its first NBA championship in 16 seasons. This will be try 5 of 7 for Jason Tatum and try 6 of 8 for Jaylen Brown in their very young careers. We'll see if they can get it done. And if they can, I believe it's going to silence the Jason Tatum slander that has permeated throughout NBA discourse over the past 2 years. And that's not to say he doesn't deserve some critiques. Matter of fact, he's still just shooting 29% from 3 in these playoffs. This is a golden opportunity for Jason Tatum to silence everybody. Matter of fact, I'm going to be releasing a video in just a few days titled "Everything You Need to Know Before the 2024 NBA Finals." In that video, we'll cover these teams' on the court tendencies, everything from stats to play-by-play to their journeys throughout this postseason. So be on the lookout for that video. If it's posted, you can click it right here. If not, YouTube is serving you a video they think you'll like. And in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching this video. As always, we'll see ya on the hardwood.